Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News of this Friday. It is the 25th day of July, 2025. And like usual, we have some more important stories to bring to you, and the stories that continue to support what the Bible has to say about what our world is going to look like at the time of the end of the age, predicting thousands of years ago what we should expect to see in the last days, because according to the book of Daniel, those that live in the last days at the time of the end will be able to understand what's going on. Daniel chapter 12, verses 8 through 10. And we totally get what's going on as we see things falling into place. So, looking at the headlines, first of all, Netanyahu says we are considering alternative options to bring the hostages home. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Now, this is due to what happened yesterday when the Israeli negotiators left the country of Qatar. They said they've had enough with Hamas. The Americans said the same thing. We're throwing in the towel. It's just not working. Hamas is not serious about negotiating, and so we'll have to find a plan B. And so Netanyahu says we're considering various options. Along the same line, Donald Trump said today, Hamas doesn't want a deal. We'll need to get rid of them. That's from the Israeli website HaYom, and it's about time this happens, and we will see when and how it does happen. Also from the Jerusalem Post, Hamas gambles with Gaza's future, leaving Israel with the blame. Isn't that always the way? Israel gets the blame for Hamas's intransigence, for their dragging their feet, for their lies one after another. The world just rejects what Israel has to say. We're not surprised. On our fourth headline, Iran's president warns this: our nuclear power lives in our scientists. Tehran is ready to strike Israel again. It's from the Israeli website N12 or the Jewish feed. Um, it's something here really interesting of what we're seeing right now with respect to Israel, with respect to Iran. They're already talking about ready to strike again. And so our fifth headline, not surprising, Israel must strike Iran before it strikes first, says a former security official. This is from the other website, YNET. So it's fascinating how all these stories are kind of coming together at once and things are all falling into place. All right, headline number one, Netanyahu says we're considering alternative options to bring the hostages home. He said Israel and the U.S. are considering alternative options home in a Friday statement, agreeing with the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff that Hamas is the obstacle to a hostage deal. The whole world should know that, but this is the truth, and it's spoken out loud here. Hamas is the obstacle to a hostage release deal. Together with our U.S. allies, we are now considering alternative options to bring our hostages home, end Hamas's terror rule, and secure lasting peace for Israel and our region, he said. And that doesn't mean having a Palestinian state next door. On Friday morning, he convened a meeting with members of the his small security cabinet, including the defense minister and senior defense officials, Israeli sources told the Jerusalem Post. The meeting was held to discuss negotiations for a deal in the war in Gaza with the question, what's next? And that's how we left yesterday at this time, if you recall, when we did our broadcast. What's next now? No more hostage negotiation. The Israeli negotiation team departed Qatar on Thursday morning for consultations in Israel after over 2 weeks of high-stakes negotiations in Doha. The U.S. team also departed Qatar, with Witkoff commenting that the latest response from Hamas showed, quote, a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. That's the same lack of desire they've had for almost 2 years. While the mediators have made a great effort, Hamas does not appear to be coordinated or acting in good faith. We will now consider alternative options to bring the hostages home and try to create a more stable environment for the people of Gaza. It's a shame that Hamas has acted in this selfish way. We are resolute in seeking an end to this conflict and a permanent peace in Gaza, Witkoff concluded. Now, the ministers in Israel are responding to Netanyahu's message. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir called to quote, stop all humanitarian aid entering Gaza and to totally occupy the strip. This is not an alternative path. It's the main path to the secure release of the hostages and achieving the victory in the war, he said in a statement. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich also viewed the current developments as positive. The humiliating negotiation with the terrorists is over. It's time for total victory, he posted on X, formerly Twitter. Now, of course, Israel has no other choice right now. Hamas, keeps dragging their feet, keeps lying about what they're going to do, agrees to certain things and backtracks, and they just don't want to have any type of agreement. As we said, this comes from Iran. Iran's running the show because Iran doesn't want Israel to be looked at as benefiting from anything that's going on now, especially after the humiliation Iran suffered in the 12-day war with Israel and also with the United States coming in, tagging along at the end. And so right now, they have no other choice. They have to move forward. Now, Trump and Netanyahu have ideas. We're told they're not telling us, obviously, and we'll just see what happens. Now, speaking of Trump, headline number two from Israel HaYom, Trump says Hamas doesn't want a deal. We'll need to get rid of them. That sounds very positive and very appropriate. Speaking to reporters at the White House on Friday, Trump said Hamas is not genuinely interested in reaching a ceasefire or releasing hostages in Gaza. They pulled out of negotiations, which was very unfortunate, Trump said. Hamas never really wanted a deal. I think they want to die, and that's very bad. We've reached a point where the job needs to be finished. Well, let's hope that happens soon. They made demands. We released many hostages. Now we're down to the last hostages, and they know what's going to happen when those last hostages are freed. That's why they're refusing a deal. I saw it happen. They walked away from the talks, and now there will be fighting. We need to clean them out. We need to get rid of them. That's Donald Trump's statement, and the key operative words here are hopefully soon to get rid of them so we can move on here. Now, along this line, there's another story that the Jerusalem Post did, and it's so sad because the way the world perceives this, and it says it all. Hamas gambles with Gaza's future, leaving Israel with the blame. How international condemnation of Israel gives Hamas hope and a reason to keep dragging its feet. And, something we've talked about over and over again here. And here's the story. Imagine you're in control of a piece of territory and your people are suffering terribly and facing a hunger crisis. Now imagine there's an agreement on the table with your enemy that would halt the fighting for 60 days and significantly ease that hardship. That deal even includes meaningful concessions from the other side. What would you do? And it goes on to say this is not some theoretical exercise, it's the very real situation currently facing Hamas. Its people are in anguish. These are the Palestinians, of course, in Gaza. And according to various reports this week, that cannot be dismissed as mere propaganda. Some are going days without food. They call out one another to reach distribution sites where food is being handed out. Hamas could easily end the misery by immediately agreeing to a ceasefire deal that's on the table. But it has not, has it? Instead, as hunger deepens, Hamas delays. It dithers over causes, sends out positive signals, only later to walk them back. It acts as though it's negotiating the purchase of a house, where another day, another week, another month really doesn't matter. But this isn't about a house. It's about a deal that could relieve the unbearable conditions of the very people Hamas claims to represent, not to mention bringing an end to the torture of the hostages it continues to hold. And yet, what does Hamas do? It balks, it haggles, it stalls. And the longer it delays, the more the spotlight shifts, not towards Hamas, but towards Israel. Around the world, television screens filled with images with malnourished Gaza babies and desperate crowds fighting over sacks of flour. So what does the world do in response? It places nearly all the blame and the responsibility on Israel, even though Hamas has nothing to do with the dire, as though Hamas has nothing to do with the dire food shortages. And in doing so, the international community only prolongs the suffering because each angry UN condemnation, each news report that shows scenes of devastation without critical context, each harsh statement from Western democracies gives Hamas oxygen. That is so, so very true. And with that oxygen, Hamas calculates it by dragging this out longer, by letting the death toll tick higher and the images get grimmer. The world will eventually force whose hand? Israel's hand, not their hand. In a rational world, which of course we don't have right now, Hamas would be the one scrambling to end the war, grabbing any deal on the table to spare its people from further misery. But this is not a rational world, is it? It certainly isn't. And what we saw again this week is the latest iteration of a grim and all too familiar pattern. There's a flurry of talk about progress in the negotiations. The world and some in Israel itself ramps up pressure on who? On Israel. Hamas balks, and we're back to square one. For the past 3 weeks, starting with the lead up to Prime Minister Netanyahu's trip to Washington, there's been chatter about a breakthrough. Isn't that the case? For 3 weeks, been saying it on and on. here. The news has been saying that. We kept saying we'll believe it when we see it. U.S. President Donald Trump himself fanned the optimism, saying on June 27th. It was a month ago, this is July 25th, saying, I think it's close. We think within the next week we're going to get a ceasefire. And again on July 16th, we have good news on Gaza. But nothing happened. And folks, it's never going to happen. So what will happen next and when will it happen? Well, that's the question we're waiting to find the answer to. And we'll find out hopefully soon. All right, let's move from Hamas to Iran now, because again, it's saber rattling as always. Headline number 4: Iraq's president warns our nuclear power lives in our scientists. Tehran is ready to strike Israel again. It's from the Israeli website N12, also called J-Feed. Iranian President Mahmoud Pezeshkian threatened new ballistic missile strike against Israel, rejecting claims that the U.S. and Israeli airstrikes destroyed Iran's nuclear program. He detailed surviving an assassination attempt and emphasized Iran's commitment to peaceful nuclear development amid halted IAEA, that's the International Atomic Energy Association, amid halted IAEA cooperation. He issued a stark warning to Israel, like he's in a position to do so, right? Declaring Iran's readiness to launch fresh ballistic missile attacks in response to any further aggression, while refuting U.S. President Donald Trump's claim that Iran's nuclear program was obliterated. In an Al Jazeera interview, Pezeshkian asserted, our nuclear capabilities are with our scientists, not in facilities. Claiming our nuclear program was obliterated is an illusion. He emphasized Iran's preparedness, stating Tehran is ready for any action by Israel, which sought to change Iran but failed. Iranian forces are ready to strike again, but Tehran does not want war. So, Iran claims it's ready to fight again. Okay, sooner or later, it seems that's what's going to happen since they're not intending to stop enriching uranium to construct a nuclear weapon. Their goal is always the same and always will be. This regime will never change. So, given the circumstances, the next headline we're doing makes common sense. Headline number 5 from YNET: Israel must strike Iran before it strikes first, says former security official. Colonel retired Amit Asa, former member of the Israeli Security Agency, says we have no choice. We have to strike them again. Israel will have to strike Iran again before it strikes the country, according to this retired colonel, former member of the Israeli Security Agency. He told ILTV News that after the Americans assisted Israel against Iran, U.S. President Donald Trump was controlling the whole system and forced us into a ceasefire without any agreement. Iran, therefore, is still willing to destroy Israel. They're willing to maintain the nuclear weapons program, he said. So we have no choice. We have to strike them again, unless they will strike us before. That's what I'm concerned about, that Iran might strike us. The previous article just said that. That's what they're threatening to do. No choice indeed. Again, it's just a matter of when, not if. Now, here's the great news, and thankfully we know from Scripture how everything is going to eventually turn out. In the interim, though, nobody knows for sure. What we do know, there's going to be more and more difficulties for Israel as we get closer to the time of the end. And for a biblical understanding of what's taking place here, please see our website, Educating Our World, particularly the section. We have 12 books on Bible prophecy, including 25 signs. We're near the end. They are all free downloads from, again, the website Educating Our World. And the whole idea is to inform you of what Scripture says is eventually going to happen. And as we see here every single day, the events that Scripture predicts will take place are falling into place so magnificently, like this great giant puzzle all coming together. And each day we say we're always amazed, but we're never surprised, because the God of the Bible means what he says and says what he means. So we're seeing these things happen that are setting the stage for what the Scripture tells us will indeed take place at the time of the end. So as believers in Jesus Christ, we rejoice that the God of the Bible is in control. We continue to preach the message that Jesus Christ is the one way to reach the one God, and that's what we're here for, why we do breaking news, educating our world, and the such like. Lest we forget, it's the first coming of Christ that is our message, always has been, and always will be. But in the meantime, we see these events shaping up in such a way that no other generation, no other group has ever seen in the last 2,000 years. And so we're very excited to be living at this time. And so our goal is to understand what the Scriptures say, to realize what the days are like that we're in, to understand the times, and then to know what to do about it. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thank you again so much for watching. Keep praying for these situations, and we'll bring you the latest when it takes place. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.